love me so much more than I could ever know. Your love is deeper than this world will ever show. And all of life's beauty shines around this moment now. The sky and the cliffs, they seem to change my life somehow. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, I will never be the same, never be the same ever again. Well, here I am waiting, Lord, my life is just for you. Please unfold all the plans that you would have me do. And if all the world's just a breath and nothing's here to stay, then all of the love we feel will save us anyway. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Oh, I will never be the same, will never be the same ever again.
And God's will is simple. The most wretched man in hell will not be Adolf Hitler. The most wretched man in hell, or woman, will not be one like Joe Stalin or some of these more modern devils. The most wretched person in hell will be a former Seventh-day Adventist.
Hello and welcome to SDAQ&A. I'm your host for today, Peter Dixon, and this is season 17, episode 1 of our program. And I was just saying to Dr. Warren Trenchard, my special guest, off air, that the show has been going for 10 years, but quite intensely for the last 5 years. And I'm, full disclosure, a big fan of Dr. Warren Trenchard's material, and was so excited when I asked Gillian Ford if she thought she could get Warren on the show last week. And she said, I'll give it a go. And here we are a week later, and we've got Dr. Warren Trenchard with us on the program. So thanks for being here, Warren. It's great to have you.
My pleasure.
Now, I'm just going to bring up on the screen the 2 books that we will focus on, but we're going to be talking about a variety of topics here, and I just want to highly recommend that you guys watching go and buy these books. There's plenty of other material that Dr. Trenchard has written over the years, and we're going to find out a little bit about him in a moment as well, for those that don't know. But these 2 books, I think I'd be fair in saying, Warren, that these 2 books represent your study of the Fred Veltman project, Life of Christ research project, and you've compiled that over 2,500 page document into a more succinct, easy to read document. And so there's that book that we're going to be looking at, and also the follow-up to that one. I love the title, Warren. The City, where is it? There we go. The City of Two Tales. And I think you expand on your Fred Veltman study, as well as there's some other essays on Ellen White. You've also done, yes, I just want to highlight those watching after today's show, or right now on your phone, on your computer, go and download both of these books. You can get them on Kindle. I've got the first one on Kindle, and I've just ordered the City of Two Tales, and Amazon tells me it's arriving on my Friday. So not in time for me to have totally perused, but I just want to encourage everybody, go and buy these 2 books if you have interest in Ellen G. White and the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and some of the things that may not add up, but are certainly open for discussion. So so let's get to know you a little bit better, Dr. Warren Trenchard. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your history, and so we can get to know you a little more.
Even while I'm having a connection problem here, I have a Commonwealth connection. I was born in St. John's, Newfoundland, when it was a crown colony of the UK. So I was actually born as a British citizen, although because of the legal things they did with Newfoundland citizenship and so on, I cannot obtain my British citizenship. I tried a few times. So early in my life, toward the end of the 1940s, Newfoundland became the 10th province of Canada. So then I officially was part of the Commonwealth of Nations, of course. And as a child, remember seeing Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip moving down the street in a convertible car, and we were out waving our whatever we waved, flags and so on in those days. So I have that. I moved from Newfoundland to the United States with my parents in 1955. My father had come just a bit earlier and was working in northern Indiana. So we moved to Indiana. I grew up from that point going to Adventist schools in that region. And I went to Indiana Academy, decided I wanted to be a chemist, and with a math background. I loved the sciences. I did all the sciences I could in high school. For some reason, when I went to Andrews University, and at that time from Emmanuel Missionary College, in fact, that was so recent that the undergraduate school was still called Emmanuel Missionary College. And I ended up doing religious studies or theology. Later went to the seminary at Andrews and graduate program where I got a Master of Arts in New Testament Studies and a BD, the Bachelor of Divinity, which was the degree now converted into Master of Divinity. But I could have paid $15 somewhere along the way and had my degree changed, but I never had because I thought it was a distinction to have one of the old BDs. And so I went into pastoral ministry in the Southern New England Conference, living and working in Massachusetts to begin with. I was a chaplain at Atlantic Union College for a year, and then had a district in Massachusetts. I had told them before I went that I was going to graduate school, and so I wasn't going to be sticking around too long. So after 2 years, I enrolled in the University of Chicago PhD program in New Testament Studies. Had the privilege of studying with one of the foremost decided to switch into a different New Testament program there, which was actually in the humanities division. It was started by the late Edgar J. Goodspeed back in the 1920s. And so that gave me a little bit more breadth. I wasn't just locked into some exegetical work on Mark, not that I had a problem with that, but I felt I needed a broader kind of academic preparation. So I studied under a few people, Alan Wickren, with whom, for example, Sakai Kubo had gotten his doctorate in New Testament textual criticism. Most people studying in that department by then were doing textual criticism, and that while I appreciated it and did work in that, I wanted something else, and I discovered Wickren had some other areas of interest, namely Hellenistic Judaism, which I really got into. And I studied then with Jonathan Z. Smith, who is probably one of the world's experts on that period of Judaism, and Bob Grant with early Christianity and so forth. So I eventually finished my program at Chicago. And you mentioned Peter Denny Fortin. His name is actually Fortin in French, and he was one of my students there. He went on to do doctoral work in Quebec and was for a time dean of the seminary at Andrews until he began to see the light a little bit more, and he is. I think for the most part, Denny has stopped drinking the Kool-Aid, and so is one that I have frequent conversations with now. These two books that you're wanting to talk about today are books that Denny and I conferred on, and he wrote little blurbs for, and so forth. So we are kind of reconnected after all of those years in. I worked through the ranks of the academic disciplines in Canada, starting as a member of the faculty, helped to bring them into the 20th century with regard to things like academic rank and the necessity of research on the part of faculty and supporting them financially and so forth. I became dean of that division and then spent about 6 years as the chief academic officer, at which time in 1995, I accepted an invitation to go to Glacier University to become Larry Garrity's senior assistant. I did that for a couple of years while doing some guest lecturing in the School of Religion, as it was called then. And when I no longer wanted to simply work with Larry, I didn't have any problem with Larry, but the job was not fulfilling. And I took a tenured position in the School of Religion, eventually became the Richards Divinity School, helped them get accreditation with the Association of Theological Schools. And I did that until 2006, when after having served a short stint as acting chief academic officer, I was appointed provost of the university. And I did that until basically retiring from full-time service. I was provost until 2010. And I went back to the divinity school, then worked part-time until 2024, when I officially retired from the last little bit of things I was doing, which was director of graduate programs for the divinity school. So my professional career, I was married for 45 years, had 3 adult sons. My wife passed away in 2013. I remarried in 2015 and don't live near my sons. I lived with one of them for a while, but I'm not there at this point in time. So I'm in Southern California and they're scattered around North America.
Wow.
And I am still a dual citizen. I became a citizen of the United States, but retained Canadian citizenship. So that makes me still officially part of the Commonwealth here.
Just like us over here in the land down under.
Right.
You were mentioning, and I'm going to research it, that possibly the Chapmans you knew in Canada when they were there, and he came here to Avondale to lecture, that I'm actually living in their house. And
that's exciting to hear. I
had
no idea when I mentioned Maury Chapman to you.
Those little connections and threads, so often found in the Seventh-day Adventist community, even though
as I mentioned to you, it's through Maury that I discovered or got acquainted with Gil Valentine to begin with.
Yes.
And we've had a number of professional encounters and personal friendship over the years since then. I knew Bill Johnson for a long time, but became especially acquainted with him after he retired and me some of the things that he was working on, and we had some interesting dialogues about that. Who else? You mentioned Des Ford. Yeah, I met Des a few times in Alberta when he came there to lecture in Central California. I think it was forbidden to go hear him. So I went anyway. And then he came on another occasion to a Seventh-day Baptist church in Riverside here in California. And So I made it a point to attend that and talk to Des after that and so forth. Interestingly enough, I was at Glacier View,
Really?
but not for the reason that you might think. Glacier View was the site of theologians and church administrators. And that had been planned for some years. And it was because that was planned at Glacier View Ranch, an Adventist camp in northern Colorado, that the SRC was held there, because a number of the people to be involved in the consultation were also on the Sanctuary Review Committee. I was apparently supposed to be on the Sanctuary Review Committee as well, because a few years ago, I was doing some research on General Conference minutes, or some research that required me to look at General Conference minutes. And I was looking at something early in the year, and there was in the GC committee minutes an action that had established the Sanctuary Review Committee and named its original members for meeting that summer in Glacier View. And I was listed there as one of the people from Canada. Now, the final listing of people on the Sanctuary Review Committee came out a few months later, probably May or June or something of that year. So I looked ahead and found minutes later on that had the definitive list, and predictably then I wasn't on that. But I did show up toward the end of the week of the SRC in time to begin our meetings on Sunday with the consultation. And I sat in on a session that involved Des and Neil Wilson sitting on the stage. Wow. And I decided then and there, not knowing what had gone on during the week, I decided then and there, the whole thing was political, right, and not theological or yes, exegetical. It was political, yes, because, and I concluded, I went away from that little afternoon event saying to myself, Des will never make it. Yeah. Because politically, he cannot survive an encounter with Neil Wilson. Now, why Neil did this, I have no idea. I mean, he had vice presidents and so forth that and other people that could have fronted this issue. But Neil decided to take this on himself. And when I saw that, it didn't surprise me. It saddened me, but it didn't surprise me that a few weeks later, Des was toast. Mm. And so anyway, I was, wow, another aspect of that is it's at that conference that I met Ray Cottrell for the first time. Right. And we got to talking and spent a lot of time during that week because we were both commissioned by Spectrum to write articles about what was going on there. He was commissioned to write the Sanctuary Review Committee, and I was commissioned to write the report on the consultation of theologians with administrators. I knew by the time that meeting started on Sunday that nobody would ever remember that event. It would be completely obliterated by the Sanctuary Review Committee. And wow, I was absolutely right. Yeah. And so I decided to entitle the article for Spectrum that appeared in the same issue as Ray Cottrell's. Under the shadow of the sanctuary. And to this day, it has always been under the shadow of the sanctuary. Now, there was another consultation the next year in Washington, D.C., or Tacoma Park. as the headquarters was then. And I attended that, and that was an interesting event as well. Where Des was the focal point for week one, and the stuff I was dealing with was taken up in week two. And that was the reason the whole thing was there to begin with, and nobody knows about it, basically.
Wow. Well, there's a whole lot of extra information to go into the puzzle of Glacier View.
Yeah, well, that's why, of course, not of course, but that's one of the reasons I decided to write something about the consensus statements. And that was just published in an
Yes.
online presentation on Spectrum.
Just recently.
Well, last week, I guess.
Yes, yes. Gillian was on the show last week, and we brought that onto the screen and talked about it. And it was very insightful. Why do you think people like Ray Cottrell weren't sacked? You know, Fritz Guy, Larry Geraghty, all of these guys, Bill Johnson, perhaps even, some of these guys that were questioning the authority of Ellen White, particularly to do with the investigative judgment and the sanctuary doctrine. Was Des just set up as the scapegoat to try and discourage anyone else continuing on? Or do you think there were plans to also get rid of people like Ray Cottrell?
Well, I don't know the answer to that. Gil wrote a piece about Des Ford 2 or 3 years ago. It had published in Spectrum, and he took the position that Des I don't know if you read that article, but it was, there's probably something to that. Cottrell was, if anything, more exegetically concerned about things than Des was, but he kept it to himself for the most part. Now, I'm not suggesting that he should have. I'm just saying I think that was possibly a difference.
Right.
And maybe what happened at the end of the SRC in August of 1980 was a consensus statement, actually two of them, that bailed out the scholars. Now, I'm not sure that that was their intention. I wouldn't. In some respects, singing the praises of the Sanctuary Review Committee. I don't see it that way. I don't have anything to preserve or to try to justify or whatever. I think maybe he did some things in that, but he still felt that the Sanctuary Review Committee was the most important event in Adventist history since 1988. I think it was one of the most important in terms of its opportunity, but I think it failed miserably.
Since 1888, you mean?
1888. I'm sorry if I said 1980. 1888. Yeah. So they had an opportunity. They had in front of them a document that could have led them to address certain issues. I'm actually very surprised at how orthodox Des was. In fact, that's what led me into looking at the consensus statements. I decided to read around in his 991-page manifesto, as I call it. And I was reading, I didn't read it all, but I read enough of it to realize Des was not a threat to anyone.
Mm.
On all of the major issues, he was absolutely orthodox. When it came to Ellen White, he said, I believe in Sister White. I believe in Ellen White and her authority and so forth. He tried to justify his exegetical concerns through his apostolesmatic principle. So, he could argue that Daniel 8 and 9, 7, 8, and 9 had to do with the time of the Maccabees and so forth. And the time prophecies and all these kinds of things were really focused on that. The sanctuary was the earthly sanctuary. It was defiled by the little horn who was he had concerns about Daniel 9 and the relationship of the 70 weeks to all of this and so forth. But he was able to remain an Orthodox Adventist by saying those were merely the first fulfillments of all this. And you read in it, I just got out his commentary a week or two ago, and I was reading, I wanted commentary to the time of his public declaration in 1979 in Northern California. Now, his commentary came out in 1978. Now, he probably wrote it much longer earlier than that, but that's when it was published by the Southern Publishing Association. Des is promoting the year-day principle in there.
Mm.
But he also promotes the apostolesmatic principle. So he, in dealing with Daniel, he is doing the exegetical work that lay behind the in Des's manifesto, and concluded that indeed his firing was political.
Yes.
It was not theological. Just as I had suspected when I was sitting there that Friday afternoon. And so I decided, I wonder what the consensus statements actually say.
Mm.
So I pulled them up, and I realized that any kind of progress to be made at that session was dead in the water before it started. Why? You look at the consensus statements, both of them start out by quoting the entire statement of fundamental belief from the recently voted General Conference session in Dallas in the spring of 1980.
Yeah.
And in fact, in the first one, which is the longer of the two, that is the first of these statements, the one on Christ in the sanctuary, there is there's a statement in there that says something to the effect, what we are going to do in the writing of this statement, dealing with Christ and his sanctuary, is to show the continuing importance, relevance, and accuracy of what we voted in Dallas.
Mm.
When I read that, I knew the thing was doomed.
Yes.
It was an exercise in futility. And in fact, even where they could have made some progress, they didn't.
Mm.
And they pointed out a few times, yes, nitstock in Daniel 8:14 does really come from a root that means something like to justify or make right something. Nine could be ferreted out more completely. But it was a matter of we can always develop better arguments, was what they were saying. When what they needed to do was to examine the issue itself. They already decide on the validity of the issue. And they said, well, what we need to do is come up with better arguments. Well, logically, that makes no sense whatsoever.
Mm.
And that, at the end of the day, was why Dick Coffin, whom I quoted at the end of that piece, said maybe these things should be called concession statements.
Yeah.
A wonderful summary of it. It was so good that I decided to end my whole piece with. That's probably more than you wanted me to get into with regard to
No,
that.
I love it. I love it. And just to clarify for those watching, when we speak about the consensus statement, sometimes it is spoken of as two because it was delivered in two parts. And so sometimes when we talk about it, we refer to it as one, the consensus statement, knowing that it's two parts. What were your thoughts on the 10-point statement that was wheeled out later the afternoon on the Friday, and Des was brought in just to a small committee and confronted with a deeper look at his teachings and thoughts, which ultimately I think it was the 10-point statement that no one got to hear, no one voted on, because he was heard to say that he agreed and could go along with the consensus document.
Well,
what are your thoughts on the
as
10-point
I've
statement?
looked at some of the correspondence, I think I'm dependent on Gil Valentine for some of that. Des was still saying, you know, in his correspondence with, is it Parmenter? His correspondence with him later on, that he was willing and able to compromise on most everything. So, yeah, I mean, this is why I don't think there was any. There was no way that Des was going to survive that.
No, that's right. It was, in my looking at it, and in season 2, we had 86 conversations over 2 hours long each, with a lot of people that were there. Everyone from Fritz Guy, Larry Geraghty, Denny 14, and my conclusion is the same as yours. It was what we call here in Australia a kangaroo court. The decision had been made. In fact, I interviewed someone in that season. My mind has gone blank who it was. And they talked about coming across a letter between Pearson and Neil Wilson. And in that letter, they were kind of saying that they wanted a line in the sand between this whole conversation about the IJ and the sanctuary and all the academics and scholars and the questioning of Ellen's authority, and that they wanted Des Ford to kind of be the finishing statement. Yeah. And I can't find that letter. Dr. Lyndon Rogers is the one who brought it up in my interview with him. I'm not sure if you've heard anything about that.
I've seen that correspondence.
Yeah,
with,
can you tell us a little bit about it?
Said more about it than I could remember, but I do remember seeing that. I think it was in some of Valentine's material that he put together. He wrote, you know, what does this all look like after 10 or 15 years, something like that, I think. But I do remember seeing something on that. I don't have anything specific on it, but
now
it is interesting. On something that happened around that time. In 1979, and you'll remember that that's when Des was at PUC and he made that public statement to a forum group. Earlier that year, Robert Pearson resigned from being president of the General Conference. And the vice president of the General Conference for North America, as he was called then, was Neil Wilson. Neil was a darling of Adventist scholars. He seemed to understand them, they thought. He interacted with them. He encouraged them. Neil became the General Conference vice president. Adventist scholars in religious studies seemed to think they had died and gone to heaven. And so that year, the meeting of what would become at that session, officially called the Andrews Society for Religious Studies. They'd been meeting with a group of scholars, just a handful to begin with. Ray Cottrell was one of the first, along with Don Neufeld. I met with them, early on a few times as well. It was really ad hoc. It was not well organized. And they met in conjunction with the Society of Biblical Literature, which after a while joined in its annual meeting with the American Academy of Religion. So the two of them, by the time of 1979, were meeting together. After some period of ad hoc and informal meetings like that, the church got involved. I don't know whether it was a top-down decision or a bottom-up or some combination of that, but the Biblical Research Institute, headed at that time by Dick Glacier, was asked to plan the meetings of this group. It had no name. And they elected officers and they met. And in the year 1979, they met in New York City at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel. I flew in from Canada a few days earlier. I was still working on my dissertation for Chicago, and I wanted to do some work at Union Theological Seminary Library. So I was in there a day or two in advance. And then I ended up going to the meetings. Thursday night was the opening meeting of the group. And Thursday night, Bill Johnson was in the chair as the director for that particular weekend. Now, I might say that during the weekend, the next day they had a business meeting and it was decided that we needed to have a name. Now, they wanted to call it the Adventist something or other, but it couldn't be because the societies at that time didn't want to be associated with any denominational group. And so they called it the Andrews Society for Religious Studies, with the focus on Andrews being not Andrews University, but J.N. Andrews as a person perceived in the early, among the early pioneers as being rather scholarly. Well, as in time, of course, immediately people identified it with Andrews University. So it was always felt to be the society associated with Andrews University. Speak at what by the end of that weekend turned out to be the Andrews Society for Religious Studies. He sat in a room, a hotel meeting room. Was not large room, but it was, there was several dozen people there and a bunch standing around. And whatever he didn't actually read a paper or talk. He was just talking to these people. And I looked around and I could see everyone was absolutely mesmerized because this was a new day, a day that people never thought would come, that somebody find themselves as a GC president. But when it was closing, Neil said something I will never forget. He said, "You can do whatever you want to. You can say whatever you want to. You can write whatever you want to." And that's what people heard. But he went on to say, "But don't stick your head up." took that as definitive, more than what he had said before. And I remember talking to my colleagues afterwards. I said, "Did you hear what Des said?" Not Des, but Neil said. And nobody picked up on that.
Mm.
And I went back to the hotel room. I was staying with a couple of people. One very conservative person, one quite progressive person. And I asked them about it, and neither of them heard it either. I never forgot that, because when I went to Glacier View, and then again, when I read Valentine's article about that after some years, Des stuck his head up.
Yes.
And Gil Valentine, not Gil Valentine, well, Gil hasn't stuck his head up necessarily, but Ray Cottrell, saying many of the same kinds of things, didn't stick his head up.
Right.
And so, I don't know. I have no idea, about the consequential nature of all of that. But it seems to me more than coincidental that out of that meeting in New York, 1979, there was a mandate laid down by the perceived darling of Adventist scholarship, who said, don't do it publicly.
Yes, yes.
Don't do it publicly.
And
just to tie that up, I was president of the ASRS in about 1992. And it was held in Washington that year. And I had done my homework and realized that the societies like the Society of Biblical Literature and American Academy of Religion no longer had an aversion to denominational monikers used by subsidiary organizations. In fact, they preferred it, that people would sort of lay all their cards on the theological table, I suppose. And so I made the abbreviated reference ASRS, but it came at that point to be called the Adventist Society for Religious Studies, and has been known that ever since. So anyway, enough of that.
Yeah, boy, that is fascinating. Fascinating observations. And that makes a lot of sense. I mean, at times in interviews that I've had here, I feel that some of the questions that I've asked some of the scholars and academics is that they feel that I'm maybe pushing them to put their head up. And there's a reticence sometimes for them to continue or to come on the show. And now I can understand why, because that kind of narrative seems to still be at play within the Adventist Church, that you'd better not put your head up. I've kind of seen it as don't rock the boat, but I think it's more than that. I think they realize that if they put their head up, they could potentially lose their job or their standing in the community. With yourself, I mean, a lot of the material that you've written and talked about appears that you've been putting your head up, but is that because you've been able to speak more freely since you retired, or have you always been a bit of a dissident kind of personality?
Well, obviously, when one retires, there are a lot of shackles, at least some of us feel, fall off. Our friend Bill Johnson was like that, I think, and a number of others, even Dick Hamill at Andrews. He was a president for part of my college and all of my seminary time. I can't say that some of that didn't happen to me, but I will tell you this as a kind of counter to that. I left ministry in the year 1970, went to graduate school, and I went to Canadian Union College in 1975. I was just one of the faculty, but 3 or 4 years into that experience, I became chair of the department, which meant that I was not only teaching now the future ministers of Canada, like Denis Fortin, but I was also in charge of the curriculum and the program. But I was unordained. I had been out of seminary since 1968. I'd been back working. I had pastored for a couple of years, interned and pastored. I had been in a teaching ministry for several years, certainly long enough to be ordained. And I was told by the Union Conference president that for reasons of my dissidence and so forth, I could not be ordained. Well, at first I was angry. I thought, this is terrible. This is very unfair. After a while, I began to wear it as a badge of honor.
Mm.
How cool, I said to myself, is it that I must be the only in the world who not only is not ordained, but for whatever reason cannot be.
Yes, that is a badge of honor.
Now, I don't say that I spend all my time, dissing the church and its theology and so forth. I tried to lay out issues for people to examine from the basis of evidence. I refused, for example, not necessarily knowing why. I mean, I knew why to some extent, but I didn't know why like I do today. I refused to use The Desire of Ages as a textbook or even an auxiliary reading in Life and Teachings of Jesus. Now I know, more about that. Not only through Fred Veltman's work, which might ease us into that.
Yes.
But in my own analysis of Ellen White's biblical scholarship.
Yes, yes.
And I have moved in the last 2 or 3 years from a focus on who was Ellen using, which is the literary dependency question. And I've done my share of that in that book that I sent you today. There's a few pieces in there about Ellen White's literary dependence on various people. I learned this from Veltman. Veltman said he'd scratch the surface. People should do more of that.
Yeah.
I did a bit of more of that. But he also said we should examine the ideas and not just the words.
Yes.
And one of the maidens, or the 10 virgins in Matthew 25, a parable which is central to Millerism and early Adventism. That material that Ellen White wrote has about 30 idea units at the beginning of 2 major pieces of work, one in the Signs of the Times and the other in the Desire of Ages. Those are heavily dependent on the work of John McDuff. Never handled by Veltman because it was Christ object lessons. And I've got a friend in the UK that I correspond with sometimes. So I wrote to him and I said, who did Ellen White use in writing Christ Object Lessons? And he wrote back several things. Well, I took one of them. I looked at most of them, and I took the one that I felt was being most definitively used. And I decided to do an idea analysis. Now, along the way, I also looked for actual verbatim quotations that were simply put in there. But between Desire of Ages and the Sides of the Times article on the 10 virgins, 25 out of the 26 first sets of ideas that started Macduff's book on Scenes from Olivet, or something was the name of it. The same words. It was a marvelous example. I had no idea I would find that until I discovered it, and it was what Veltman said needed to be done.
Yes.
You know, he did stuff looking for verbal continuity, and even then he was able to say that 31.4%, I think, of the material in the Desire of Ages was derivative rather than
verbatim,
written by Ellen White from scratch.
Yeah.
That she was dependent on this. Well, I said, okay, I think Fred underestimated this. Another essay in that book that we talked about, that I'm talking about right now, is the first critical review of Fred Veltman's work that's ever been written. I mean, nothing was written during his lifetime, or certainly not during immediately after he issued that massive work. And one of the things that I examined in there, there's a lot of positive stuff, like all the things he recommended people do that he wasn't able to do. I've tried to do a few of those things. But one of the things I examined was what I considered the axis between his and while Fred, I think, tried to be objective, and in many ways turned out to be quite objective, his orthodoxy, as well as the massive size of what he was trying to do, did get in the way.
Yes.
And that is a bit of a problem. And I'm not critical of him for that. I just simply pointed out, because I think a lot of in the theology of Adventism, most of them having grown up from children with this, that the best they could do, and I put Ray Cottrell in this regard, the best they could do was to simply say, we need to have a better job, do a better job with our arguments.
Yes.
When I'm saying we need to do a better job with our conclusions.
Yes.
And if we follow the arguments that we should be following from the biblical text, for example, we will come up with the conclusions that are supported biblically.
Yes. And this is what has really struck me about your work particularly. You're building on the Ray Cottrell, Ford, Veltman initiatives that are suggesting more work needs to be done, and you're doing that work. And what hit me this morning, as you'd sent me through last night, the PDF of your book, I'll just bring it again up onto the screen. The City of Two Tales. What really struck me about it, so we're going to talk a little bit about Veltman in a moment, and then I want to talk about a little bit about your first work, which I'll just quickly bring onto the screen in relation to this topic. So the Veltman report is an important study. Like you said, there's some bias there perhaps that got in the way, but at least it's a move forward. It's a presentation of this data of Ellen White's borrowing, etc., her use of sources. I think you mentioned it's about 2,500 pages. It's quite in depth. It's difficult to work through. you released this book, The Desire of Ages and its Sources, and you kind of put it into bite-sized chunks, and you give a really interesting portrayal of it. And I saw hints of what was to come next. And so as I was reading this morning, and I'm very much looking forward to getting, you know, sorry, I'll just bring that up properly. I'm very much looking forward to getting my actual copy in a couple of days' time. But what struck me as I'm reading it in the early hours of this morning is that you are extending the knowledge into what are some conclusions we can draw here. And it struck me that it's not even necessarily about the words and what was verbatim and what percentage was paraphrased and what percentage was followed in sequence, and the maths of it. You were outlining some incredible stories about the way about the way Ellen White portrays the story of Judas, Jesus walking on the water, using that example as that's why the apostles trusted him, when in fact in the sequence of the true story that didn't happen till later. You painted this picture in my mind in just maybe a couple of hours reading this morning of Ellen's total using other people's material in sequence, their ideas, to totally portray a fiction. That she's padding out the story so much that it becomes a lens that people look at through into the Bible and see a whole different kind of Bible story than if you just read the Bible. And I see that as quite concerning. And I really value that you are going that extra mile. And I feel like there's going to be another book in this trilogy where your conclusions will be even more concise and defined. What do you think about what I've just said there? And then we'll duck back into the first book.
Let me tell you how I got into Veltman. I mean, I knew Fred Veltman as a fellow New Testament looker. We met and both were presenting some stuff to the Daniel and Revelation Committee one time when it met in San Diego. I came down from Canada and so forth. Anyway, I knew Fred, I knew what he was doing and so forth. So I followed it with some interest later, but I hadn't, I mean, his work is so massive that it's almost impossible to digest. So I was working on something that I entitled and published. I intended it to be published under the title, The Biblical Writings of Ellen White. Fiction of Ellen White. Now, I didn't.
Sorry, that just cut out. Can you just say that again, that last sentence?
Yeah, when I published this piece in Spectrum, I think it was 2021 or something like that. And it was, I submitted it as The Biblical Writings of Ellen White. But at the end of the piece, and I was examining exegetically and in a parallel form, the synoptic gospel accounts in Matthew, Mark, and Luke of the Transfiguration. And then I began to look at what Ellen White did with it. This is quite outside of anything to do with Veltman, although after a while I thought to myself, I wonder if this is in Fred's work, because I knew he'd done only a handful of chapters of Desire of Ages. And that's another reason to continue that work, because 15 out of 87 chapters is not very much. He selected it randomly, and so I think it's valid what he came up with. And I noticed that he has a chapter on that, and he decided in his book that 31.4%, I think, of the materials of Ellen White in Desire of Ages shows some level of literary dependence. Well, I said, let me do this myself. I want to see the ideas. I want to see the sequence of things. I want to see the biblical quotations and why they're selected and what order they're selected and so forth. And then I added it all up. And I came up with about 93%. And I thought to myself, wow, that's amazing. That's what got me into Veltman. I thought I need to look at Veltman more closely. So at the end of that study for Spectrum, I said, well, what kind of writing is this anyway in Desire of Age? How would we classify it? Well, New Testament scholars have a way of classifying material from the 19th century that deal with Jesus. And it's by Albert Schweitzer, one of whose doctorates was in New Testament studies. And Schweitzer wrote a book that was translated into English fairly early on called The Quest of the Historical Jesus. Well, in German, it was Der Frage, der historische Jesu, which is the question of the quest, although the quest aspect has caught on. There was a second quest in the 1960s from the students of Bultmann, and a more recent quest, the third quest, with people closer to the end of in the 90s and into the early part of this century. But what Schweitzer was doing, he was examining all. They were written in German. He was writing in German, so most of the stuff was being written in German. These were people who were pushing the envelope on critical studies, examining the question of this is where the priority of Mark emerged. The identification of Q, which I work with quite a bit now, came into being. These studies of Jesus in the 19th century were focused on psychological nuances or economic or political nuances and so forth. And Schweitzer dissed them all, said basically none of those get at the historical Jesus. So that was his question about die Frage, the historische Jesu. Well, I looked at Ellen White's writing on the life of Jesus, and I thought, that's not one of the books that Schweitzer would have concerned himself with. And sure enough, it's not one that Schweitzer paid any attention to at all. If you look at the prefaces to some of these books, like the third volume of The Spirit of Prophecy, 1878, or Desire of Ages, they will talk about the genre of writing. Not lives of Jesus. Well, I was confronted then with this. What we've got, self-understanding here by those who publish this. This is a life of Christ. But what is it really like? Is it history? Is it theology? Is it exegesis? What is it? I decided that it often was fictional. And so I was going to call it historical fiction. But I backed away from that because I thought, well, that's putting too much credence on the history side. Because when you talk about historical novel, for example, you usually find it based in some historical reality. The incident, the issues, sometimes some of the people, maybe a material, often love story between two people, sometimes on different sides of the the conflict or the issue or whatever the case may be. And when it comes to the Bible, I was not able to make that kind of judgment.
Yeah.
I couldn't say, for example, that Jesus ever actually walked on the water. I couldn't say part of the tradition, but to go ahead and call it biblical fiction seemed inappropriate to me. So I simply came up with the term. I'm sorry, not biblical fiction, but historical fiction. I came up with the term biblical fiction because clearly she was basing it on the text of the Bible, but going into all kinds of fictional areas. And so after a while, after I did that book, I began to focus, that is, Veltman, and I did some studies that were essays in that essay book, notably two of them, I think. One is the study of Matthew's strange declaration in chapter 27, that when Jesus died, the grave split open and there was a group of people who emerged, saints. The biblical text says they woke up. So just as they were asleep, the sleeping saints, these are metaphors for death and resurrection, of course. And so I thought this is really interesting. Ellen follows this stuff. She wrote on that story for 40 years. The first came out in 1858 in Spiritual Gifts 1. She has an account of the resurrection of Jesus. Now, I was into that at first, and I was looking at how this is handled in Adventist literature over 170 years, and it hasn't materially changed, including the Adventist commentary and so forth. It started back in 1854, I think it was. A guy named Stevenson opined on something like this. Actually, no, I'm sorry, that's a different one that's in that book. But people early in the Ellen, for example, in 1858 had written about this. So I documented that her writing on this was actually quite an entire episode that is attached to the story that is not in the biblical text at all.
Yes, yes.
And that's the episode of these people sticking around Jerusalem for 40 days and ascending to heaven with Jesus.
With Jesus, yeah.
And Jesus is presenting them to God the Father on the throne as first fruits of his resurrection.
Yeah.
Now, then the other one that is like that is the fictional embellishment of the account of the calling of the disciples. It's in Mark and in Luke, and there's a simple thing that the disciples cross the lake with Jesus one evening. He lands on the shore. He goes up a mountain, prays all night. They're hanging around down below. He comes down the next morning and decides to select from the large group 12 to be his special followers. And the names of them are given, starting with Peter and ending with Judas, as all the names do, all those lists do. In the meantime, Ellen created two things. When Jesus named them disciples, in Luke, they're called apostles, but that's, I think, probably Luke's editorial touch there. He names 12. He picks out 12 out of a larger group. And what does he do? He conducts an ordination service. He has them all kneeling around him on the ground. He putting his hands on them. And Ellen actually uses the expression, and they were thereby ordained to the gospel ministry.
Yeah.
There's absolutely nothing like that in the biblical text. Now, the closest thing is that the Gospel of Mark at one point says he ordained 12. But the word ordained is not the word for ordained used throughout the New Testament. It's a simple Greek word that simply means to do something, poieo. And it's used hundreds of times, poieo this, poieo that, he do this. In other words, he appointed, he made 12 disciples or followers or apostles. He didn't ordain them. Details are not described like she has them. The other thing in there is a really bizarre thing, because when he gets down from the mountain, he's meeting with these 12 that he's picked out. And somebody comes up to him from the larger group, apparently, and says, I want to be one of these. The guy is sincere. Now, this turns out to be Judas Iscariot. And there's a conversation then between Judas and Jesus that is not in the biblical text. And at one point, Judas says to Jesus, at least in the words of Ellen White, which are quoted actually and identified by her editors as coming from the Gospel of Matthew and not from one of these two texts. Judas says to Jesus, Master, Master, I will follow you wherever you go. Now you've heard that. Everybody's heard that. And Jesus replied in language that we all know. Foxes have holes, the birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. Now you look in the New Testament, that's biblical language, but it was not said by Judas. It was said by a scribe who is unnamed, who walks up to Jesus and he says, Master, Master, I will follow you wherever you go. And Jesus says to a crowd of people who's around there, foxes have holes, the birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. This is a whole episode added to the story of the Bible with biblical language taken from another story that is put in the mouth of Judas, and no explanation, except the editors knew enough about it that they put a reference in the text that this comes from the 8th chapter of the Gospel of Matthew. Well, so I did a bunch of stuff like that in that particular article, that particular book. And the thing that I decided to do afterwards was to write an article, which was later published in Spectrum. Is Ellen using? To the question of who is using Ellen authoritatively. I had identified a number of these fictional extra-biblical materials, as I call them, in her writing on the Synoptic Gospels. They appear in 5 or 6 of those chapters. And I said to myself, let me look at the Adventist Bible commentary and see what they do with those. What are they doing? And in every single case, the comments, the exegetical comments in the Adventist Bible commentary on those examples that I posed there, they follow Ellen to the T.
Yeah.
They got it from. So I concluded 2 things. Number one, of course, Ellen is not an authority on biblical interpretation. Number 2, the Adventist commentary is not a genuine commentary. And I went back to an article that Ray Cottrell wrote in 1985 in Spectrum on the untold story of the Adventist Bible Commentary. That was supposed to be my article. Well, I insisted that Ray write that. I went to Ray one time because I wanted to find out from him if the list of people that had written the various individual comments throughout the books in that 7-volume set that I had gotten from Earl Hilgert, who said it agreed with a list that Leona Running had shared with him. And later on, I learned it was the same list that Siegfried Horn had put in his diary. I was going to write an article for Spectrum and simply in it identify who had written what. And so I was in Southern California from Canada, and I was a friend of Ray's by then. I looked him up and I said, Ray, you were one of the editors. I want to run this list by you. He said, oh, absolutely. That's correct. He said, that agrees with my list. I said, so you have a list too? Yeah. So we talked about it. I said, Ray, you know more about this than I. You need to write this. You can write from inside the whole thing. I can only write from outside many years later. He said, no, you should write it. I said, no, Ray, you write it. So I'm glad he wrote it.
Mm.
He wrote that piece, and at the end of it, he included all that list of names. He also had a little section of that article on Ellen White. And it starts out by in that section, he's talking about the frustration that he and Don Neufeld had in trying to write things that they realized Ellen had written up in a different kind of way. So he starts the whole section out by saying, Elder Nickel came to us as editors. Now, this is Francis Nickel, who was the editor of the Adventist Review at the time. And this was not a GC project, but a project of the Review and Herald Publishing Association. And they had selected and they were kindred spirits in many respects. They agreed on a lot of things. And Cottrell talks about that. But the first thing he says, Nickel came to us and he said, this commentary should not contain anything that could be perceived as contrary to the.
Sorry, can you just say that a bit again? It just cut out again. Can you just say that?
Okay.
That commentary cannot.
Nickel said to Ray Cottrell and maybe some other of the associate editors, assistant editors or whatever, he said, this commentary cannot be perceived as having anything like.
Sorry, that cut out again. As not having anything.
This commentary cannot have anything that could be perceived as contrary to the writings of Ellen White.
Right.
So I looked at the marketing materials in the Adventist Review, published a few months before that commentary was issued in 1954, the first volumes of it. And when it actually came out. And, it was, they talked about, one of the things in there was Adventists can now have a commentary in which they will not find any error. It will be a true reflection of Adventist teachings. Right. And the new commentary that they're it a little less blatantly. But I went through these articles. I did another study of Ellen White's, how the Adventist Bible Commentary handled Ellen White's extra biblical materials in the Synoptic Gospels. I went through what I had written, before and researched. I had all. Are we back now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Sorry.
So I decided to do a study of these particular examples that I had, and I found that in every case, the commentary followed Ellen White's fictional notations as representing the biblical text,
Yes.
including the new episodes,
Wow.
like the ascension of the people raised when Jesus died. So I have submitted another piece to Spectrum on so this is not necessarily looking at just extra biblical fictional stuff, but just how much of Ellen White actually appears, not just in the end of the chapters in the book of Daniel, but within the comments themselves. I found over 50 of them. I discussed only a few because there's so many. Another piece that I've done for Adventists Today, they were interested in it because they were interested in my portrait of Balaam. Some of these random kinds of things, I was interested that the Balaam in the New Testament is really excoriated, demonized. And I looked up the short references throughout the Old Testament, and he's demonized there too. So I decided to go back and read the whole Balaam story in Numbers 24 to 27. Maybe it's 24 to 27. It's 3 chapters in there. It's over 70 verses. And I found a totally different Balaam. It's not a Balaam that I would excoriate. I found a Balaam who followed exactly what Yahweh told him to do. First time he wouldn't go with these guys from Moab to curse Israel until he discussed it with Yahweh. And so he discussed it with Yahweh and said, no, you can't. They, the king Balak sent another delegation up to Mesopotamia to where Balaam was. And he offered him more money and all of this stuff. And Balaam hadn't agreed on any price up to that point, nor did he ever agree on a price. He said, well, I've got to talk to Yahweh again. And this time when he talked to Yahweh, Yahweh said, oh, go ahead and go. Amazing. His donkey saw, and he wished he could kill the donkey. Then the angel appeared to Balaam, and Balaam was contrite, and he said, oh, I'm so sorry, I sinned. He said, I'll go back home, I won't go. And the angel says, oh no, go ahead and go, but you'll only be able to say what Yahweh allows you to say. Well, anyway. Became seduced. Some of the men became seduced by women of Moab. And there was an incident in the next chapter of Numbers that talked about that defection. At the end of it, it never mentions Balaam throughout any of it, except at the end when the Israelites had a campaign against them, military campaign. It says Balaam was killed. But what is interesting is that Balaam is never involved in the story. Now, you might surmise maybe he was, but he was never involved in the story. Okay, so I wanted to see what kind of picture Ellen had in Patriarchs and Prophets on the story of Balaam. Well, she completely buys into the demonized Balaam from the rest of the Old Testament and the New Testament.
Right.
She starts out by saying Balaam used to be a prophet of Yahweh, but he had apostatized. Nothing like that in the biblical text, not even in the demonized parts of the text. And then at the end of the story, I mean, she tells the story. Most of it is kind of. She has these negative innuendos about Balaam all through the story. Okay, fine. At the end of it, Balaam goes back home. He only can say what Yahweh told him to say, and that the final oracle he came up with. He immediately realized that there was one way of screwing the Israelites, and that was to get the Moabite women involved. So she says he immediately went back, we're talking, 1,500 miles or something, all the way from Moab, all the way down to the southern part of Palestine. He immediately went back there and led in that insurrection, as it were. So, I'm looking at this stuff. The Adventist Bible Commentary is a little bit more discreet in handling that material. Section is.
Can I just interrupt a second there? Where it's starting to cut in and out even more than before, and this is such important content. A tech friend of mine that helps me out has suggested if you move back a bit, and can you close any windows you might have open except for the Restream one?
You're talking about me doing that?
Yeah, yes. If you could do that, if you sit back a little bit, apparently the computer gets a bit confused with movement. Perfect, that's great. And then just close any windows except for the Restream. That could be annoying because you might be using some notes, etc.
I wasn't actually. I deliberately.
Yeah, I love how it's just flowing from the top of your head. It's incredible. We'll just see if that works a little bit. And what I also will do is we'll just go to a quick break, and I will reboot my computer. And can you do the same your end, and then just go to the email and reconnect the link? So we'll okay. Cross to a short break. Everyone, I'm chatting with Dr. Warren Trenchard. He's written a couple of incredible books on Ellen White, and particularly looking at how she added, in many ways, I like your term, historic fiction. And I really want to discuss what the implications of this are. So we'll just go to a short break. We've got a really good sized audience watching. Apologize for the tech issue here. It's not either of our fault. Often it's just Wi-Fi playing up. Lots of people might be on at the moment. So yeah, if you just find a place to sit without moving, close all your windows except Restream, and then in the break I'll disconnect you but reconnect via the email link, and after the break we should have be able to proceed without any problem. But it's such a wonderful conversation. I'm really enjoying it, Warren. So let's go to a break and see if we can do all those little things. And when we come back, we hope that the disconnection issue is sorted. We'll be right back, everybody.
You love me so much more than I could ever know. Your love is deeper than this world will ever show. and all of life's beauty shines around this moment now. The sky and the cliffs, they seem to change my life somehow. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, 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 I will never be the same, never be the same ever again. Here I am waiting, Lord, my life is just for you. Please unfold all the plans that you would have me do. And if all the world's just a breath and nothing's here to stay, then all of the love we feel will save us anyway. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. I will never be the same, will never be the same ever again. Love me so much more than I could ever know. Your love is deeper than this world will ever show. And all of life's beauty shines around this moment now. The sky and the cliffs, they seem to change my life somehow. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, 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 I will never be the same, never be the same ever again. Here I am waiting, Lord, my life is just for you. Please unfold all the plans that you would have me do. And if all the world's just a breath and nothing's here to stay, and all of the love we feel will save us anyway. And I will never be the same, never be the same. Oh, I will never be the same, never be the same ever again.
Hello and welcome back. It looks like we are just having some pretty big technical problems today. I do apologize. Currently, Dr. Warren Trenchard is just trying to re-log back in. We'll have a chat together while he's trying to do that. Or we might just have to reschedule today's program. What he is saying, I think, is really important. And in some ways, I'm kind of hoping that we can't reconnect today, because I don't want this program to have the dropping out of sound here. But let's try it again, and let's see. Dr. Trenchard is back in the house, and we'll cross fingers and see if those problems have been addressed, because I really value this conversation and the content and what you've been saying about how perhaps people in the scholars and historians within the Adventist Church in the past have been able to raise these issues and have suggested further delving into them is important. And then many historians, academics and scholars like yourself, Denny Fortin, Valentine, McAdams, Casebolt, have begun exploring the content more, observing it more, releasing it, revealing it more, But what I've noticed in your latest work, which I'll bring up again onto the chat, the A City of Two Tales, what I've noticed with that is you are doing more than just looking at the maths of her borrowing and looking at how she literally is changing the narrative of the Bible to make it more, what did you call it? Historic fiction? Are you there still?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, did you call it that her writing is more historic fiction than biblical?
Well, I was trying to figure out what kind of genre we were looking at
Yeah.
when I was first doing this, and I decided that in terms of the contemporary types of literature, it sounded like. Then I realized that that places a lot of credence on the history aspect of that, and I wasn't prepared to do that. But what I could say is that she definitely was working with the biblical text, but doing so fictionally. So I came
Yes.
up with the notion of biblical fiction, and Spectrum decided to use that in the title. And I had hoped that people would actually read themselves up to that point and see my reasoning.
Biblical fiction or historic fiction? Yeah, we're cutting out. Look, I'm wondering if you're okay with it. I'm going to get my tech guy to come in and have a look over the next couple of days, because whenever I've watched your material before, there's never been an issue when I've seen your work for AT and whatnot. I'm wondering if we should reconvene and have a part 2 of the conversation, because it's just starting to get a bit worse, the glitching and the cutting out. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, one thing I can try, I've got two different lines ranging network. The other is a more powerful network. I'm on the wide ranging one right now. Let me
Try and switch to the.
Let me go to the other one
Okay.
just to see.
And as I was saying earlier, I don't think it's an issue actually with either your or my connection. I think it's just bad luck.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you there.
All right, let's try this for a little bit. I don't know that this will settle it, but I have, my my router has two different types of networks.
Yeah.
One is it's wide, and I mean you can go quite a.
Yeah, it looks like it's still cutting out.
Yeah.
How would you feel? And I like I was just saying, this seems to be bad luck, not your or my issue. I think simultaneously in your part of the world and my part of the world, a lot of people are just using the Wi-Fi right now. So it's very unfortunate it's happened, because I've been looking forward to talking to you for years. Is it possible we could reconvene and have part 2 of this, and we'll try and cross fingers that the next time doesn't do the same? Is that possible?
Yeah, if it's not too long into the future. I mean, if we could do it.
Oh no, I mean next week.
Yeah, I was hoping maybe even something. What is this, Wednesday? By the end of this week, is that even possible?
We could do that. Yeah, we could postpone our Good News Fellowship program and do this instead, same time tomorrow.
Well, that would be
Would that work
That
for
would be
you?
ideal. I mean, I've got some stuff that
Yeah.
if you want to look.
Yeah, well, I will try and get my tech guy in just to have a look, but like I said, I think it's just bad luck. I think yeah.
No, it does seem to be really.
Yeah, I think it's just bad
cutting in
luck.
and out.
And let's if you're happy, let's do same time tomorrow, and we will just pick up where we left off with a quick recap of what we've chatted about. And I'm pretty sure that it's an anomaly that is, because there's some really important questions I want to just ask you. And I do apologize on behalf of the internet that this has been going on today, these interruptions. Shall we do that? Shall we?
I'm game with that. Yes.
That would be absolutely wonderful. Well, let's reconvene tomorrow. Thank you, everybody, for watching and for your patience. There's still an incredible amount of content in what we'll call part 1. Tomorrow we'll have part 2, and let's cross fingers that the internet, fairies don't conspire to do the same thing tomorrow. Because as I said, I've been wanting to chat with you for years. So it's a bit frustrating, isn't it?
Well, I'll also see if I can bring the router. Not a problem normally, but
yeah, I know. When I've watched your material, it's not been a problem. Are you using a laptop or a desktop?
I'm using a laptop.
Do you have a desktop you could maybe use? Sometimes that works better using Google Chrome, or on a laptop using Google Chrome, or even, do you have an iPhone? Do you have a desktop or a laptop, or an iPhone that you could use?
I have an iPhone.
I wonder even just out of interest, should we just try that now, but still have part 2 tomorrow, but just to see if it works? You'll have to get your iPhone and open the link in the email sent to your iPhone. So those watching, we're trying to fix a technical problem, and we're going to try and reconvene tomorrow at the same time. And we're just going to do a little test on Dr. Warren Trenchard's iPhone. And there's some good comments and things coming through. Let's see if this works any better. So that's now on your iPhone, is it?
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm looking up this email on my iPhone.
Right.
Want me to
I think click
connect on.
Yeah, connect from your iPhone, from the link in your email on the iPhone. And what we'll do is we'll still go ahead tomorrow, but what we'll try and do today is just confirm that the iPhone works at least.
This is ready to join as guest.
Okay, I'll just remove you from here and just try your iPhone connection. Apologies, everyone. But yeah, in the last 10 minutes, we've lost half the audience because of the technical issue. And it's such an important conversation. Let's try this.
Okay, I can see you now.
Oh, yeah, that's a lot better. And let's just give it a minute and see. So what we'll do is let's reconvene tomorrow using the iPhone, but also if you just have it, if you can set it up on a book or something so you don't have to hold it or anything. But I think that has fixed the problem, which is good. Yeah, I think we've fixed the problem there. So what say we just go for another 5 minutes just to kind of round off this as a part one, and then tomorrow we'll reconvene at the same time using the iPhone, because that's working really well. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I'm just going to switch. Give me a second here. I'm going to switch to my earphones,
Yep.
AirPods.
And you'll need to twist it sideways so that we have a landscape instead of the, it'll follow suit in a moment, unless that screen is locked.
It is locked, but can you see me
Yeah.
turn now?
It hasn't switched over, so it might be locked on your actual iPhone.
Yeah, this thing upgraded a while ago, so it may have locked that. Anyway, I can.
It's definitely not cutting out now, though. So look, what I put forward is that we reconvene same time tomorrow. And I think he's just changing the frame, the angle there. Yeah, we're still there.
Okay, I have to turn the Bluetooth off here, so just give me a second.
Sure.
Come on. Hear you on my.
It does appear that the iPhone is.
I'll have to work on the screen thing, but yes, I can hear you okay now. We are not cutting out, it looks like.
So what we'll do is, I think that's going to work, but what we'll try and do is have it, if you're able to work out to turn it sideways and turn that screen lock, or I can do things like that to trim the edge. So I think we'll be right. Look, I do apologize on behalf of the internet fairies that this has happened. But let's reconvene tomorrow, same time, using this iPhone. And by same time, I don't mean now, I mean when we started tonight's program. Will that be okay with you?
I think that will work, yeah.
Yeah. Now, what my tech guy has said in the comments is that when you join the stream, it has to be put sideways as you're clicking the link, and then it will be fine. But I have seen people in midstream just flip their phone sideways, and it's come good. What time is it there now for you?
It's 8:37.
Oh, okay, good. So not too late. Yeah. Okay. Well, I will send the link to you tomorrow at your time, 6:30 p.m. And we will have part 2 plus a bit of a recap of today's program. Is that okay with you, Warren?
Okay, so are you going to send this before 6:30 like you did today?
Yes, same as today, about 15 minutes beforehand. Yeah, just so we can check.
Right.
Is that does that work okay with you? And I
think that will work.
Yeah, I've already had a few people write to me and say they've bought the book, so at least we've been able to generate some sales from the books. And
well, I should let you know that I've never received any royalties on these things from Oak and Acorn. So if the prices are quite reasonable on them, but I don't see any of it. I mean, I have a couple of books that I get royalties on, but these aren't among them. So.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe we can share the link for those as well.
Well, my first one was a Greek vocabulary study guide for students, right. And that's been in print since about 1990.
Yeah.
And it's still in print today. And then the other one, and that's published by Zondervan, now owned by HarperCollins. The other one is based on the same computer database, enhanced considerably, but I created a small dictionary of New Testament Greek that is published by Cambridge University Press.
Right.
So really, those are the things that I know more about New Testament. I've got a book of about 12 or 13 essays under consideration by E.J. Brill in Europe right now. And these are standard New Testament exegesis research pieces. So my work on Adventist studies and Ellen White and so on is late to the game, and I come at all of this stuff from the perspective of a biblical student, you know. So.
Yeah. One of your students from the 80s is watching, Jerry Connell, and he mentions that Dr. Trenchard has written Greek grammar textbooks for both Zondervan and Cambridge University. I'll try and find the links for those because I'm interested in helping promote your work as much as possible.
Well, that's kind of it.
Okay, well,
if you look at my the emails that I've sent you back and forth have been with my personal website and not the university.
Yes.
And there's a link there to my website, my own personal website.
Yes, that might be the best thing, is to promote your website. I have looked at that, yes.
And for the books and so forth, you can click on where to purchase them and all of that stuff.
Perfect. So, I will get
that. In fact,
that up
all of them,
tomorrow.
I think, all of them are available in Zondervan. On Amazon, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. Okay.
But you'll see on that website. I was going to mention at some point. I really started doing a lot of these things when I got enough time after my career in teaching and university administration. So from 1921 to the present, I've made approximately 50 Zoom presentations. Like you said, you've seen, I guess, with A Today and stuff like that.
Yeah.
About 50 of them on all kinds of topics. Some of them I write about, some of them are just specific for that. And I've published 6 books in that amount of time, including a couple of short ones on Fred Veltman's work and a thesis from a master's program at PUC. And then I've got 13 articles in press right now, or chapters of books. And in addition to that, did 21 articles for a Bible dictionary that the Adventist Church is maybe going to publish at some time in the future. Remind me of a story about that, though. There's a very interesting little story.
Okay,
about
we can start with that tomorrow.
One of the articles that I did for that particular piece.
So how will I remind you? That's an article.
Not everything that I wrote was acceptable to them. And
right.
This particular one was quite egregious the way they dealt with it. So
I'm interested in also chatting to you a little bit about this book, Reclaiming the Prophet. So we can chat about that tomorrow as well. Well, at least we know now that the iPhone works, and we'll just try and get it to go landscape.
Yeah, I'm sure I can get that fixed. It used to work that way before one of the recent upgrades. So, okay.
Okay. Well, it'll be a great excuse for me to get to chat with you again. So we'll say farewell for tonight, and we'll look forward to catching up with you tomorrow, same time, everybody. So just a quick reminder, our Good News Fellowship is going to be postponed. We might do it later in the day. We'll see how we go. But we're definitely going to be chatting to Dr. Warren Trenchard again tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Pacific time Thursday, and Australian time 11:30 a.m. New South Wales. Okay, thank you very much, Warren. We'll see you tomorrow.
Okay, have a good day, and for me, an evening, I guess.
Yes, that's right. Thank you. See you soon. Bye.